Hello everybody, and another beautiful warm day here in Dublin. And in today's video I want to talk about the major stumbling block when it comes to the Iranian-American deal that was signed last week, and that is Israel. Now, first off the block, I have a fairly positive experience with regards to Israel. It's an amazing country that I have visited. I have worked there in a previous career. I have studied Israeli politics and Israeli history, going all the way back to biblical times, and I find the whole region to be fascinating. Nevertheless, what is going on there, I have to say, is something that is quite shocking. Starting with the Gaza incursions. After Hamas attacked and took 200 Israelis hostage, the Israeli army has basically been on the warpath throughout the whole region. They've used this current crisis between America and Iran as an excuse to not only join in on the fray, but also to invade their neighbour Lebanon, another amazing place with great people. The issue here is that Lebanon was specifically mentioned as part of the peace deal between the Americans and the Iranians, but as Israel wasn't at the table, it's kind of difficult for either side to enforce a peace between the two sides, particularly as the Israelis are not actually fighting the Lebanese, but are fighting against a group called Hezbollah, which is a terrorist organization operating in South Lebanon. This has resulted in the Israeli army literally invading Lebanon to try to root out Hezbollah, and in repeatedly bombing Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. Now, this is quite shocking from an Irish perspective because it brings back memories of what could have happened during the Troubles. During the Troubles, which was a sectarian conflict in Northern Ireland between the Irish Republican Army on one side, plus a few other pro-Irish Republic groups, versus the UVF on the other side, plus a few other pro-unionist groups. With the British Army basically trying to keep the two sides apart, but mostly going out against the IRA. About the early stages of that war, there was repeated bombing attacks made on Britain, most famously in Manchester, and this resulted in a great amount of anger and resentment directed towards all Irish people by people in Britain, which is really only naturally so. This whole situation then resulted in a lot of pressure being put on the Irish government to help stop arms shipments from going through the Republic of Ireland into Northern Ireland, and to publicly come out and try and take down the IRA, which were made in a legal organisation here in Ireland, along with their political body, Sinn Féin. How this reflects back to Irish history, what's going on in the Middle East, is the fact that the British could have taken a very different take, basically the Israeli take, and invaded across the border, attacking towns like Drogheda and Dundalk, and even bombing Dublin. It wasn't something that they did not have the capability to do. Thankfully, the British government at the time didn't decide to do so, as who knows why, but they were wise enough to understand that the troubles in Northern Ireland were not the Irish government in a proxy war against the British government. It was in fact a group of Irish, violent Irish nationalists who were just involved in this, with very little support from within the Republic of Ireland itself, at least in the latter stages. Unfortunately, the Israelis have taken a different tact, and while they will go into these regions and attack Hezbollah as much as they want, they're just building up a whole load of resentment again in the next generation that's going to come back to bite them. This same goes for Gaza. They haven't wiped out every single Palestinian living in Gaza, or they haven't, and they won't be able to wipe out every single Hezbollah supporter living in South Lebanon. This is just impossible. And I can understand to a certain degree the frustration and anger that the Israelis have about being attacked across the border by rockets from an organization that they thought was more or less put to bed after an operation there a few years ago where they took out most of Hezbollah's leadership. But you are not going to be able to wipe out a terrorist organization by using military force. You need to try. Unfortunately, I know there's the common phrase, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and I can understand that mentality, but at the end of the day it's the only way to reduce or destroy their support network. So right now, the way things stand in the Middle East is there is conflicting reports coming from whether or not Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. They did close it over the weekend. I don't know if they've reopened it again, but this is just going to become a reoccurring issue over the next couple of months, if not years, thanks to the actions of Israel. Now, why are the Israelis taking such an aggressive stance when they had reasonably good relations with Lebanon up to the point that they invaded, and the Lebanese were actually cooperating with Israeli forces to try to take down the remnants of Hezbollah? Well, it boils down, unfortunately, to Benjamin Netanyahu, I can think, and he is desperate to stay in power, as he's going to be facing very severe corruption charges if he ever leaves power, particularly if the country is not in the middle of a war. He has managed to use both the attacks on Gaza and this new assault on Lebanon as excuses to not run a general election, which he's kind of supposed to, but if the country's at war, you can't really. And he will continue to do so and try to cling on to power for as long as possible. So the whole region, in fact the whole world, has been held hostage because one guy has basically decided this is the best way to save his own ass. It's a frightful situation, terrible, but that is unfortunately the situation we find ourselves in at the moment, at least from my view. We don't have an America to stand up to him. Trump can bluster and blow and give out. And on the side note, just something interesting about that, the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu has collapsed an awful lot. But despite the fact that Trump has gone online several times now and called Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis as some choice words, we don't see any accusations being levelled against him of anti-Semitism. Interesting that. However, I'm sure I'm going to get some accusations of anti-Semitism made on this video for just voicing my point of view without any expletives. Anyway, the situation as stands is precarious, and we can only just hope that people will basically start to calm down the situation as much as possible. But we'll have to see if that actually occurs. Anyway, have a good day.